180 ways in space as we capture the international flavor of Seattle World's Fair in the skies. Here are scientific crossroads that symbolize the international spirit of space age tomorrow.
What's up? What's up? Check, check. What's up, gang? What's up, gang? Shouts out to Crucible Crew out here. This is Rooks G, ROXG. We're about started. Give me 1 second here. I'm about to get started here. Give me 1 more minute. This is Rooks G, my buddy. We're about to get started on Master and Commander out there. Shouts out to Crucible Crew out there. Shouts out to his family. Shouts out to his family. All right, let's get after it. Let's get after it. That was Rooks G. What's up, everybody? Tonight we're doing Master and Commander, The Far Side of the World. Hope y'all are taking it easy on this Saturday night. Tonight we got a dudes rock movie. This one's for the boys. This one's for everyone, but this one's for the boys. This is a dudes rock movie. This is Master and Commander 2003. This is a great film. This is not only a great film, I'd say this is probably a perfect film in just about every way. It's Peter Weir. Peter Weir directed it, starring Russell Crowe. I'm going to get into the dynamics of the film, talk about what the film is, why it's so good, why it was underrated at the time, and also, just for context, I read Master and Commander, the book, and I read The Far Side of the World today. So I read Master and Commander last night. I read Far Side of the World this morning. And the books are totally different from the film, but that's okay. The film is wonderful. It's so good in every way. It's just about perfect. Shouts out to Rough Hands out there for the $5 super chat. Thank you. Shouts out to the Crucible crew out there, Rachel, BPF, Andy, everybody out there. All right, so let's get into it. Let's talk about the film. 2003, Peter Weir, Australian director. We've covered Peter Weir here before because we did the Mosquito Coast. We talked about him a few times, and this is Russell Crowe, like at the height of his sort of arc of great films. I mean, not that it really matters, but he'd already won the Oscar for Gladiator. He was in Michael Mann's The Insider. He played John Nash in A Beautiful Mind, right, which is the movie about game theory. And really, this movie is at the peak. And the reason that it didn't do that well was because in 2003, you remember what other movie came out in 2003? It was Lord of the Rings: Return of the King. So when that movie came out, it really just obliterated every other movie. Now, one thing that I find interesting in this is that. So here's what the movie's about. If you've never seen this, you could, first of all, if you've never seen this movie, what are you doing? You have to watch this movie. This movie fucking rocks. It's so good. I'm trying not to spurg out about the movie, but it's so fucking good. It's a total, we win watching this movie. It's so great. And there are a couple reasons for it, which I'm going to get into, talking about, again, the story arc and the narrative. But one thing that's interesting is that the books, especially, this kind of takes from three different books, all from Patrick O'Brian. The first one's Master and Commander. It's a long series. The second is HMS Surprise, and the third is The Far Side of the World. But it's totally different. It's not totally different, but it's a lot different than those. And one reason is that the books, and we've done a lot of nautical literature. I mean, we just did Heart of Darkness, which is nautical, and we've done Moby Dick. We've done all sorts of nautical mariner themes. We've done The Seafarer, right? Breaking O's on the crest of a wave, says the Seafarer poet. Well, this is really, and it's an Enlightenment. It's height of the Enlightenment. It's set in 1805. It's originally they were going to set it in 1812, but what I think Peter Weir's decision in making the film was that it's pretty smart actually, that they couldn't set it in 1812 because Americans, first of all, think of the War of 1812, if they even consider it, right? Probably movie-going audiences probably don't even consider that. But the War of 1812 is where the British, part of that is the British came here and burned down D.C. So instead, they made the enemy the French in the movie, instead of in the book, in The Far Side of the World. Lucky Jack Aubrey, who's Russell Crowe, the main character, is chasing an American ship who is harassing the whalers off the coast of South America. So instead of making the enemy Americans, they made it the French. And this is pretty clever, actually, because my theory about why they did this is that Well, first of all, it's an obvious one, hot take, which is that the American studio is financing the movie, so of course the Americans aren't going to be the bad guy. And also, if it's made in 2003, this was right in the wake of Big Nine, so we couldn't have the Americans being the bad guys, and it was convenient to have the French as the bad guys because of their post Big Nine actions at the time. So I think that's why they did this. Also because, they're a British fleet, so it makes sense that, especially for American audiences, they would be chasing a French ship. So the story basically is that there is a ship in the British Navy. It's captained by Russell Crowe, who is Lucky Jack. His name's Jack Aubrey. And he's chasing a British ship as part of the overall Napoleonic forces. And basically what comes to pass is that the French are the Navy, especially it comes down to basically just like one ship is standing in the way of raising guillotines in Piccadilly, as he says. It's really interesting because it's a patriotic movie, but we as Americans or whoever you are watching the movie, it's interesting how the movie supersedes that. It transcends all that stuff. And it's not just like obviously it's an English ship, but it transcends that, and it becomes a story about heroism, manliness, leadership, virtue. And my other sort of thesis for this movie is that when you read Machiavelli, one thing that Machiavelli says in The Prince is that when a leader has a choice between leading through terror and strength and fear, or through love, he says it's always pragmatic to lead through fear, because you remember this chapter that we covered The Prince here, but what he says is basically that when someone is leading through love and they have friendship and they have people that follow them, the other side, like the other person in this sort of bargain, feels free to break that bond whenever it's necessary or whenever it's convenient for them. And so it's always sort of requisite upon the leader, the Machiavellian prince, to lead through fear, because people are afraid to break the bond. But this movie is an example of where that doesn't really hold in the microcosmic sense on the ship. And the ship is going to stand for England, okay, as Lucky Jack says later on. It stands for England. This is England, and this is their country. And the reason for that is that this is a very clever thing that they do in the film. From the very beginning of the film until the very end, you can see that, first of all of the characters have purpose on the ship. No one is without a job, and it runs through a hierarchy and through discipline. And the breaking of discipline and rigidity and rules are what separates it. It's a stopgap before one breaks into mutiny. Like, the ship is always right on the verge of mutiny, basically. All the sort of ships are. It's obviously their biggest fear. I watched the Mutiny on the Bounty again. I watched it twice in the last week. And then also the Bounty movie with Mel Gibson, Daniel Day-Lewis, and Anthony Hopkins, which is obviously Captain Bligh, William Bligh. And mutinies are rare on naval ships. But it's so egregious because they're in the middle of a war. And so the ship has so much going for it. It's amazing the way that we look at the ship in the movie. It's very different in the book, in the first Master and Commander, because Master and Commander, the book, is about how it starts off on land, first of all, and Jack Aubrey is at a concert, and he gets elbowed in the ribs by this guy Stephen Maturin, who ends up like that's his best friend on the ship. But he gets elbowed in the ribs. He thinks he's going to fight a duel. He goes off and he gets a commission to take a ship called the Sophie, and then he meets Stephen in the streets, and then basically they become friends. He finds out that he's a surgeon, and then he takes him on board the ship, and then it's a story of friendship. And so the first book is about they like getting his first ship. He becomes a captain, a master and commander for the first time. And it's really, there's a lot of exposition about teaching us the reader about all of the entire anatomy of the ship, which is huge. There's so much in this. There's so much seagoing verbiage, and we really feel like we're sort of ensconced within the life of the ship. But at the end of it, a bunch of stuff happens, and then by the way, by the end of the story, he gets court-martialed. And then he's acquitted at the court-martial because of Stephen. And then Master and Commander is where he's taken on a bigger ship, the Surprise, and now he's going after American ships. But in the movie, he's going after an even larger ship, which is a state-of-the-art technology for the time. And one thing that's really cool about the movie is that it shows because of filmmaking, it has the power to show us, and there's no real exposition in the film. We see all the various points of technology and like everything that works and everything that functions within the movie. And I'll say this: before I get into what happens in the movie, the best thing about the movie probably is the supporting cast, because we know who Russell Crowe is, and oftentimes when we're watching movies, it's hard to distinguish between looking at a famous actor and the character that he's playing. But from the moment that you see him in this movie, he is the captain. He's the leader. And what's really, 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 yes, the Acheron. Yes, John. Yeah, it's the Acheron. She's Yankee built. She's built in Boston. And Nagel, or one of his friends, has seen it being built. And that sort of occurs, but with Aubrey in the books. But what's great about this is that his style of leadership on the ship is such that every person trusts absolutely in what he's doing. They don't question him. The only person that questions him is his friend Stephen, who plays the physician. He's a physician. He's not your common surgeon, right? He says in his Bristolian accent, and and we have a dynamic and a kind of a weird dialectic that occurs in some of the conversations about the nature of power and what power is, and of course when they get into conversations about Lord Nelson, and also talking about absolute power corrupts absolutely, and they should be more democratic on the ship, according to Stephen, who has kind of anarchical ideas but ideals in the story, but it's within the context of the Enlightenment, and so Stephen ends up in the books being a spy master, and but you can see that he probably would have Napoleonic sympathies, but instead he's on the ship, and Jack represents everything that England is supposed to be. And the way that we see this as a metaphor for us is that I think it's interesting in light of the contrast, which is you think about your own life and you think about leadership situations or just leadership in politics, leadership in any situation, maybe where you work or whatever. And the great thing about this movie is that when this is also contrasted with The Bounty, and that is that whenever the captain tells them to do something, they do it. They don't gripe about it. They don't waste time. They just do it. So they have to know that when they're on the ship and they're sailing around Cape Horn and they're in a storm and they've got like 200 souls on board or whatever, all this stuff, they have to know and they have to trust that when the captain tells them to do something, they do it. Now, this is an interesting situation because the doctor sort of points out that they're living in times. This is really the focal point of one of the focal points of the movie is that they're coming to a time when absolute power or monarchy is obviously being threatened, and the hierarchical system is also unraveling, right? Because of the democratization, the French Revolution, all this stuff, the American Revolution just happened. And so the question is, like, how do you know that your leader is the one that you should trust and that he has your best interest at heart? And he actually questions him about this at one point. He says, how do we know that you sailing around the world isn't just a point of pride, that you don't want to do this just for your pride, for your own sense of pride? And Captain Jack points out that it's not his pride, it's his sense of duty. So duty and pride sort of come to two sort of standing points, and we have an argument between the two. But in the end, one has to trust in the captain, and the captain points out that there's hierarchy. He even points out in the movie there's hierarchies in nature. So it's really interesting. So, okay, so let's get to how the movie starts. So first of all, I talked about it's 2003. It's post Big Nine. It's Peter Weir. It's Russell Crowe. And I got to say that, you know, when this movie came out, I thought it looked lame. I remember watching the commercials for it, and I didn't get the title of the movie. I'd never heard of the books, you know, and I'm a reader, and I just never heard of the books. I didn't get it. And there were a whole series of nautical movies leading up to this, and Russell Crowe movies. And I was also put off by the fact that Russell Crowe had just come off of that movie Proof of Life. Do you remember that? Proof of Life is the movie where I think it's like Meg Ryan, or is it Meg Ryan? And he's like, somebody gets taken hostage like in Colombia or something, and he's got to do the deal to free him. But all I remember from the movie, and I remember this watching the movie at the time, was that his entire line in the movie is proof of life. He says it like 400 times in the movie. He's like, we need a proof of life. Proof of life. Meg Ryan need a proof of life. You want me to sex you? Proof of life. It's the whole fucking movie. We need proof of life here. We need proof of life. It's 400 times in the movie. So I was kind of put off by it. But it's Russell Crowe, so whatever. And then I saw I don't think I saw it in the cinema, but I saw it later when it came out. And of course, you know, in the years since then, it's been 21 years since the film came out. And it's a very popular movie, especially with the homeboys, because first of all, I would say there's not a single lady in the movie, but there is like one. So they get to Brazil, and they come up to the ship, and it's the Brazilians. You know, there's even the dude with like a top hat, and he's got a feather in it. He looks like some sort of shaman, you know, and they're passing him bananas and stuff. It's clearly off the coast of Brazil. And then there's one girl, and she's like got a little parasol, and she's looking up at Captain Jack, and he's looking down at her, and that's like the only lady in the movie, right? So dudes rock. This movie fucking rules, right? And it's just dudes being dudes, right? It's just the whole movie is dudes being dudes, and every personality on the movie in the movie, every personality on the boat is badass. Like there's one guy who plays what's called the Jonah, and he's the one who they say brings bad luck. But the movie actually starts with him. So here's how the movie starts. So we get darkness. We get a brief prologue. You know, we get a sort of an epigraph saying that Napoleon is, mastered Europe. He's mastered the continent, and that the ships are harassing the English ships, and that Captain Jack Aubrey, Lucky Jack, we don't know him as that yet, but has been tasked with following him. And also at this point, it's 1805. They move it to 1805. And I think Nelson dies in the year 1805, but he's still alive in the life of the movie. And Nelson is probably the most important unseen character in the movie, because we're gonna see that everybody is going to. Yes, exactly. Shouts out to JW right there for that $50 super chat. We do not have time for your damn hobby, sir. That moment encapsulates the dichotomy between Lucky Jack and Paul Bettany. Thank you so much for doing this, bros. It's my favorite movie all time and an excellent book. Hey, shouts out to you, JW. Thank you so much for that super chat. Really appreciate you. Yes. So we see the darkness, and we see the ship, and we hear the kind of the bells, right? It's 6 bells or whatever. You know, it's there's a night watch, and then we see the face of a guy that we are going to come to not like on the ship, and this is great casting, because right away, this midshipman, we don't like his face, right? We see this guy, we see his face, and we go, oh no, who's this fucking guy? And he's on the night watch, he pulls out his glass, he's looking at it through his glass, and he thinks he sees something. And he calls one of the other midshipmen over, and he says, you know, look through this glass, do you see the guy? And he looks through his spyglass, and he says, I can't see anything. He says, it was like a ghost. It was a ghost ship. So we know right away, first of all, this is brilliant because the movie starts off in silence and not in media res. It's in media res in terms of their overall passage, they've obviously gone all the way from Plymouth or wherever they've come from Bristol or Plymouth, and all the way down to near the coast of South America. So they're in mid-voyage, and we also were in mid-voyage because everybody's asleep on the ship. It's nighttime. You know, they got the night watch out. But the action builds quite quickly right here, and the way that they do this in the film is really crazy because it mirrors Gladiator a lot. Because remember in Gladiator, we start off with the darkness and the mist, and then we're in Germania, and then we see all the Roman lines, and we see that there's a kind of an attempt at a parlay. That big giant German comes out, in the right, and he's got the head of the Roman messenger or whatever, and he throws it, and he's got his giant battle axe, and then we get strength and honor, and then we go into the battle, and the movie begins gradually. But the action begins suddenly, and there's a reason for it. So already we're thrown right into the action. It's great. So he says, "Do you want to call? To quarters?" Right? And he says, the guy says, "I don't know." So this is the problem with this character. Already we know who this character is. We know that he's indecisive. He's too old for his position. He looks too old for his position. The other midshipman looks a lot younger than him. Because he's got his long sideburns, his face looks a little weathered. He looks too old for the position. That's gonna be justified later on in the film, and we know that he not only is he indecisive, but he seems weak, right? So the other midshipman takes over and says, "We shall be to quarters," right? And so everybody's up. Like the bells start ringing, everybody gets up, and then here comes Lucky Jack. And I gotta say, like, Russell Crowe is perfect for this movie, and he does look so fucking cool. He looks. This is a great movie okay. So I've gone on about Dune. I've talked about how great Dune is for Hollywood and how movies are going to start mimicking that. But really, looking back on it, the past is prologue, and looking back at this film is perfect in the sense that it's from another era. Not only is it literally from another era, because it's from post Big Nine, now we're all the way in G reset post modernism, but it also takes place during the war of, during the latter day Napoleonic Wars. We're talking height of the Enlightenment, height of the neoclassical era, and so we're in an era that has a direct resonance and result of that time. But we also see that this is a time when there were still people who believed in hierarchy, leadership, being a man, and there's no compromises. And it's really something that Hollywood should look back on and go, there's a reason that the hero's journey and that there's an archetypal hero and that there's a time-honored tradition of men overcoming stuff. And the greatest thing about this is that right after this segment in the movie, we see that Jack's disposition is such that he respects his enemy. They even point out continuously through the movie that, how do you know that he would do that? Well, because that's what I would do, right? Or remember, you're not the prey in this situation, you're the predator. Or, the handing the sword over. It's chivalric. It's like you respect your enemy, but they have to go all the way to the ends of the earth to pursue it and to fulfill their duty. And this is something that people have not us, but people have no concept of this. They have people now. This is the reason why you read reviews. I read one review the other day, and it was like, why do guys like this movie so much? Is it an example of positive masculinity? Well, it's like, because things like honor and duty and leadership exist. They are things, and they are things that we need to have a civilization and to have a society. They are things that men crave, that we look for, that we respect in each other. Right? You may not agree with the decisions being made, but at least it's a decision, right? What was it MacArthur said about a strong decision today is better than a great decision tomorrow, or what? I forget who said that. But so we see Captain Jack come out, and he's decked out. He's in his regalia. He's decked out in his regalia, and he takes the glass. He looks, and this is so good. This is so well, dude. This gives me goosebumps watching this movie. We see the dawn breaking, and we see the clouds in the distance on the open sea, and we see a flash. And this is great because notice that in most movies, people, when they see a flash, they see a muzzle flash, or they see a cannon, or they see and they're in a war situation, all the time they see it and they're too stunned by it and it's too late. That happens in almost every movie. But we trust Jack right away in this movie because he sees the flash and immediately he turns around, yells to his crew, get down. Everybody gets down, and the cannonball, goes through the ship. And he's been surprised now. And he admits that he's made a mistake. Not doing that, but he's made a mistake in that he didn't foresee that this would be the place for an attack. He didn't foresee, and it happens to him twice. And he even says aloud that, he's been surprised twice. He's the HMS Surprise, and he's been surprised twice, and he won't let it happen again. So basically their ship gets wrecked. There's a whole bunch of holes in it. They're too far away to fire because they have a superior ship. They're out of range. They're in range for the French ship, the Acheron, but their cannons can't make it to the other ship. So he does the only thing he can, he knows how to do at this point, which is he sees the fog. And he says, "Take us into the fog," and then the fog, which is fine, which is honor bound. It's using subterfuge and cloaking to escape for the time being. They're not turning tail and running. Shouts out to JW there for that $20 super chat. Though we be at the far side of the world, the ship is our home. The ship is England, exactly. Rousing speech, man. It's such a good speech. One of the best war speeches, I think, in any movie, and because of its contrast with other films, it's so well done. So they move into the fog and they disappear for the time being, and they look at the maps. They see, we've got to make it to these shoals for repairs, and of course the doctor points out that it would be great to go to Brazil and and find a new, what do they have to find, a new mizzen mast or something. But he says, we don't have time to go trucking through the jungle and looking for a new mast. We've got to get our repairs done on ship. And what's really cool is that they all of the materials that they need are always on the ship. They've got everything that they need. And you wonder, with so many people on the ship, and you wonder, with how do they eat? How do they, But that's the way the ship works, is that everything's accounted for. They've got everything on the ship. So they take the ship off and then they repair it, right? And what happens at this point? At this point, they find that their mission is that this is the ship they're looking for. And then these two guys come in, these two lowly guys, Nagel. I really like the character Nagel. He's the one who gets flogged. I really like him. He reminds me of one of my friends, and basically he and his buddy come in, and they've made a model of the Acheron, and they say this is the Acheron. And they made it with wood. They put a lot of time into it, and the way that Jack receives them is so cool. I think I found this so cool, particularly because, again, in contrast to Mutiny on the Bounty. So Mutiny on the Bounty and the story of Captain Bligh is interesting because I'm still not sure how to view it. On the one hand, Captain Bligh was the captain, and when he tells you to do something, do it. And the crew is always loafing. Okay, so there's something to be said for hierarchy. So just listen to what he says. But on the other hand, when you read the accounts of the court martial and of the other sailors on board, Captain Bligh was a dick. And, I don't like authority as much as everybody else hates it, especially from some dipshit. And he's constantly being a dickhead. But, he gets sort of exonerated at the court martial, and then he's given governorship in Australia. Did you know that Captain Bligh went off and they made him governor in Australia, where he was again put out. There was a rebellion, and then they threw him out of the country. Also, I don't have any sympathy for the sailors who mutinied, because they mutinied, and also they went to Pitcairn Island. And if you know anything about Pitcairn Island, now look, the sins of the fathers, right? So that's them. That's not the But the thing about Pitcairn Island, I'm not going to say it here, but if you do any cursory reading on Pitcairn Island, very, very, it's full of creeps, full of creepers, and those are the sons of the people that were there. I'm not saying but I'm saying that they're worse. They're worse now than even the mutineers. So I think the contrast comes when they go in and they hand him this model of this boat, and Lucky Jack looks at him, and there's something in his eyes. He's firm, but he's grateful. And he says, thank you, an extra ration of rum for both these men. They both get an extra ration of rum. They salute, they walk out. And then his buddy, the doctor, turns to him and he says, interesting. And he says, who would have thought that, Nagel, this lowly shipman, lowly dude on the ship, saw the ship being constructed in Boston, and he turns out to be the savior of the ship. And Captain Jack recognizes that, which is, I think, really great. This is a leadership quality. You're firm, you have rules, but when the people come in and they offer you something, you're objective about it, you're dispassionate about it, but you give them something for their trouble and you think about using it. And he does. And then he makes a point of saying, like, this is what a wonderful technological age we live in, because the ship has a brand new design. It's like got a line. I don't know about ships, but it's faster, it's bigger, and it can hold more people, and it's an amazing ship. So they say, we can't outrun the ship. We're gonna have to do something about this, right? So then, what happens in the course of I'm kind of going out of sequence here in the movie, but over the course of the movie, we see that Hallam is the midshipman who was weak when it came to spotting the ship in the distance, the Acheron, right? And at one point, Hallam is walking on the deck, and Nagel walks past him. And first of all, Nagel is drinking because they gave him some extra rations of grog because when they're making their way around Cape Horn, there's a great scene. This is probably the best scene in the movie. They're making their way around Cape Horn. It's frosty. All the guys are like throwing snowballs and stuff, but they've still got their duty. And Captain Jack decides to keep the sails out so they can get advantage of the wind and make their way around it quicker. And remember that it took. Captain Bligh couldn't make his way around the Cape of Good Hope. I mean, it's very difficult to make your way around these in the southern climes. But he keeps the sails out, and then eventually he orders the sailors up. They're supposed to take in the sails, and then the mizzenmast falls down into the water, and with it goes the poor kid who designed the Acheron model, right? And this is a difficult scene. Okay, so the sail has gone into the water, the mizzenmast with it, and it's anchoring the ship. So they're going to capsize. And the lines are drawn, and the guy is going to drown out in the water. And Lucky Jack is yelling for the kid to swim for it. Swim for the lines, we'll pull you in. But he's told pretty much right away that if they don't cut the lines, then they're all going to drown. And so we see this harrowing scene where he turns around and looks at one of his lieutenants, and even Nagel is standing there, and they get the hatchets out, and they start cutting the lines. And this is a very difficult scene. I think this really sells the story for us because one thing in film that I've constantly talked about is the fact that it's all in the eyes. Film is all about the eyes. And we see Jack, and you look in his eyes, and you can tell without him saying a word that he wants to save this boy, and that this is a test of his leadership, and he feels awful about it. But what happens is that because of the rigidity, because of the discipline, because of the hierarchy on the ship, because they are a complete sailing vessel where everybody is, they all want to be, this is the anti-Machiavellian point, that everyone on the ship wants to be there. They all delight in their jobs. They feel honor. They feel honorable about doing whatever their job, whether it's swabbing the deck or whatever, they all want to be there. And so Nagel starts cutting the lines for his friend. He's going to let his friend drown. Now, this is difficult because morally, this brings to mind a point that I think people often come to this sort of decision-making thing, these hypotheticals. And the thing is that, like, I always like to imagine that on, if it's Big Nine and the plane is headed for the city, right? And it's going to, they say it's going to crash into the thing, right? So, of course, Dick Cheney or whoever says, it's got to go. Okay, so oftentimes the moral argument is that, you save the mass of people by eliminating the smaller number of people, because if you don't, then the bigger number of people could go. Okay, but the problem is that when you sacrifice one person for any number of people, you're still doing it yourself, and you're still murdering the guy, right? Now you've killed him. But I think that, and I'm not trying to be glib. I'm trying to make a point here about how it's different, and they sort of solve the argument in this instance in the movie, because no matter which way you cut it, it's going to be difficult. Like the whole ship cannot sink with all these people because of the circumstances. They can't turn around. They can't put a boat in the water. They can't cast lines because they're like by Antarctica. They're off the Tierra del Fuego. The waves are so big, and the ship is already listing, right? Like they're going to be torn down. There's no other way around it. And Jack even demonstrates his willingness to help the kid. He genuinely wants to save the kid, right? But in the circumstances, I think in the movie, tell me if you think I'm wrong, there's nothing they can do. There's literally nothing they can do. And this is one of the casualties of war, which is unfortunate. And afterwards, and also I think they solve it by the fact that his very friend does his duty and realizes that it could be himself. And we sort of see that in his eyes, that if the tables were turned, he would expect that to happen to him. He would do that. And then afterwards, we see this scene in his quarters where the doctor says to Lucky Jack, that no matter how many people have died under his knife or how many people he's seen dead in battle, he has to constantly remind himself that it was the enemy that killed them, not him, which I think is a pretty powerful argument here. And he says you have to choose between the lesser of two evils, right? Now, he says weevils, right, because that's going back to their dinner that they had, which I'll cover in a second. I don't agree with the lesser of two evils argument in like pretty much in most situations, especially when it comes to things like voodoo, right, which is a completely different situation. I mean, don't ask me to put my name to somebody. If it's the lesser of two evils, it's still evil. I don't like that. That becomes a false dialectic, I suppose. But in this situation, he did all that he could, and he followed his training, and that's all that he could do. But he also feels for Nagel, right? He says, that the kid was popular. The crew will take it hard. Especially Nagel, give him some extra rations. And then we see this scene where we go through the bowels of the ship, and we see Nagel, and he's sitting there, and he's weeping. This is really what makes this a great film, is friendship, right? We see that this supporting actor who I don't know his name, but he's sitting in the ship. He's lit by candlelight, and the other fellas are coming around. They're not saying a word. You know, they give him their ration or whatever. They give him some rum. They do all they can do, and then they let him be. And that's powerful to me. That's great. And he looks at this picture, and it's a picture of his friend. He rolls it up. He puts it in his locker. He shuts it, and he puts it away. And that's powerful to me. That's I can't think of another movie that has, that comes to mind that's occurred recently, where we get this sort of real depiction of real manliness and real friendship in the movie. I think it's very, very cool. It's very good. It's very honest. It's very true. And you can see it in their eyes. There's a time to weep in this situation. They let him be. And guess what? He's got to get on with his duty. And this is solved because later Nagel will be scrubbing the deck, and they say that there's a Jonah on board. And a Jonah is a character on the ship that they think brings bad luck. And one thing that's clever here is that instead of questioning and putting the onus on the loss of the guy and the what could be seen as bad seamanship on Captain Jack, instead they take a scapegoat, and the scapegoat is, of course, the midshipman at the beginning, Hallam, and Hallam is constantly disliked by the crew, and so what happens here is that he's walking along on the ship, and he gets his shoulder checked by Nagel. Captain Jack sees it, and he says, "You there! Clap that man in irons," right? And he immediately exerts his authority, his power. He doesn't let it go, and he says, "We're going to flog this guy." Because in the book, one thing that's not in the movie, in the book, every day they read the Articles of War every single day. They know the rules. In fact, the crew even looks forward to the reading of the Articles of War because it's like a mantra. It's like a thing that they rely on every day. It's an oath. It's a thing that they rely on every day, and they know that they can look to that. There's a set of rules, and they stand. So that the guy grabs him, claps him in irons, and he's going to be flogged. And there's a scene in the first book where a guy gets flogged, and Lucky Jack is lenient with the flogging, but he still has him flogged. But it's like when he's flogging him, he's kind of flogging the mast instead of the guy's back more, so he gets a little bit at ease. But in the book, he gets, I think, 24 lashes. But Nagel knows that. He made a decision. He doesn't try to squirm out of it. He doesn't try to make excuses. He made a decision, and it's his actions that have to be held to account. So he takes it. He takes it like a man. He winces at the first lash, and that's it. So then, here's the thing. When they go back into his quarters, the doctor, this is when the doctor makes his argument to him that, like, is the lashing really necessary? And Captain Jack tells him, essentially, that, yes, it is necessary. It doesn't, there are rules, and disrespect and insubordination are one step away from mutiny. And all they have to hold their world together are these rules. They have to abide by them. They have to want to abide by them. So the doctor is not pleased with this, but he tells him, look, it's my duty. Then he questions him about, like, okay, are we doing this thing for pride? Are we chasing this ship for pride? And he says, well, my orders ran out when I got to the Cape, right? That I wasn't supposed to pursue him any further. But this is the reason why Captain Jack is superior in the movie, because he is firmly set on his belief in God, king, country, the Navy, and his duty. He has to do these things, and part of that means exceeding his orders when the orders run out, when they don't know the current situation, because they're out on the open sea. So he knows that they would say to go after this ship, so he's going to go after it, and he says he's going to go all the way, he's going to pursue it to the ends of the earth, no matter the cost, which is honorable. Now, the doctor points out as a counterpoint that, like, yeah, but what about all these guys on the ship? You know, there's a lot of guys here who have been pressed into service. These guys are poor. And he's like, but it doesn't matter. The situation is now. We can't account for each person's personal experience and their feelings and their stories when we have a job to do. We're all here for this purpose. There's no getting out. You can't just jump ship. They're in the middle of the ocean. They have to do this. And you know, the other thing that's really great about this movie is that this is a counterpoint to another movie that came out at the same time, which is Pirates of the Caribbean. Pirates of the Caribbean, the first one, you know, especially, is entertaining. You know, Jack Sparrow is funny. You know, it's an entertaining, light movie, but it's also like, we're also talking about swashbuckling pirates instead of a military force, right? All of this is for fortune, glory, and treasure rather than for duty and God, king, and country. So it's a completely different situation. And also the fact that it comes from a Disney ride, right? This is not that. This is a boy's movie and a grown man's movie. This is a movie with real things that are always valuable and always come to mind and are the backbone of every story that we read about heroes, right? Making decisions and living with it. It's kind of like, you know, how dudes oftentimes are afraid to stand up for themselves because of, you know, in real life, because of the consequences or because of what could happen to them or whatever, you know, when they're being insulted or affronted, you know, in person, or when they're physically assaulted, you know, when something physical happens to them in person. But the fact is that being a man is just about it's about being able to take a beating as much as it is winning. It's the fact that you can lose and get up again and keep going. Right? Everybody knows this. Everybody knows this. And nobody wins all the time. Nobody, you know, I think of that story about Mike Tyson, right? Which is just, maybe that's the exception to the rule. Mike Tyson said, right, that, you know, what was it like when you became heavyweight champion of the world? And he said, I realized that I was not only the heavyweight champion of the world, but that I could fight anybody in the world and win. Right? He could fight anyone. Like he literally, that is a real possibility for him, right, at the time. And he said that made him depressed. And I could see that because hubris threatens you, right? For everyone else in the world, there's always somebody bigger or better or whatever it is, you know. So you have to be able to learn to take the L's and to keep going, right? And to find the next win. And so that's what Nagel does in the movie. That's what Jack does in the movie. And Jack is the leader. That's what he does. He loses the first battle in the movie, right? The ship gets torn apart, but he takes the L. He respects the guy that did it to him, and he learns from it, and then he goes back into the fight. This is really rare shit, man. This seems like something that would be so obvious in movies and in stories now. Like, this is the bread and butter of stories. It seems like, you know, it's doesn't need to be spoken, but it does, because the world that we live in does not understand that. The world we live in, all of that is going away. All of that is going away. It's almost gone. All of that is almost dead. Do you even understand? I know you do. But do you understand this is precarious? Like, I know there are points in history where everything gets threatened and we're going to lose everything. We're right on the edge. We're constantly right on the edge of that now, every day. Even in our personal lives, in daily situations, the way people think and the way people do things is different, and it threatens all of that. So it's great to watch a movie, for example, and the movies are the biggest example of where this shit is being torn apart, right? Because every movie tells us to tear it apart now. Everything tells us to just sweep it all away. Every commercial you watch, every movie, every television show. There aren't even books published now that do this. The books now are shit. Everything, I'm sorry I'm yelling, but everything, I mean, it's frustrating, man. It's frustrating. Think about the people you talk to. Think about your friends, your lifelong friends. Your lifelong friends who all of a sudden come from fucking Mars, man. So it's both disconcerting and it's hard. It's invigorating to see a movie like this where there's still something, right? There's still people willing to. There's still people willing to put everything on the line. You know, when it really comes down to it. Look, we've all been through we all went through a situation 4 years ago where everything was put on the line. I know I did. I can't think of anybody out there who didn't come to the point around this time 4 years ago where everything got put on the line. They always talk about the line in the sand. Well, you're going to draw the line in the sand. And for most of those times it was bullshit. It was about something theoretical or something political or whatever. This was where the greater political thing and everything else got put down into a line in every single person's individual life, dealing with their own bodies, minds, and souls. So when it comes to that thing that happened 4 years ago, you know what I'm talking about. That thing, I'm still pissed about it. I still find it very, very hard to have, to have grace or to, because I can't understand how people wouldn't know about the thing when it happened, when the stabbies came out. I don't see how people couldn't, but I'm a human being as fallible as anybody else. So I got to have grace for those people, but I don't want to hear about anything else when those people crossed that line and went over into the stabby camp. I don't want to hear about that. I don't want to hear from them. Now I live in the world, so we have to hear from them every day. Right. But that's it, so, I guess that was the time. That was one of the times when everybody had to be willing to, willing to. It was wild to see so many people bend the knee. Exactly. And I don't think I don't care what I don't. It's not you guys, but in real life, people are frivolous with that time, and they make light of it. And I'm not fucking standing for. I'm not. I don't want to hear it anymore. I don't want to hear it from those people that it was, that it's frivolous. Oh, you could have just taken the stabby. I don't want to hear from them. I mean, I want to hear from them in, talking to people like I have to get by in my regular day. But I'm happy with the decision I made. And I know you guys are. And that was the time. And I'm proud of that. I know I'm being vague, but, I can't be any more specific. Here, that. So anyway, man, I got worked up there, people. But seriously, it's worth it to be worked up sometimes about stuff, isn't it? And what I like about this movie is that I respect. Yes, Dave Gentry says no stabby for me. Good for you. Good for you. Awesome. Exactly. Good. And it doesn't matter if anybody else is not proud of you. You be proud of yourself for that. We are. I'm proud. I'm just a dude, so I don't want to say I'm proud of you, but I'm just, I'm all jacked up on that Mountain Dew and my Red Bull. Hey guys, if you like the stream, give me a like. Just click that like. Subscribe if you want to, and also you can look at any of the links there. You can support me through any of the links. So then, anyway, what happens is Nagel gets flogged, and then we see that Hallam comes out and he talks to Blake. Blake is one of the great characters in this book. In Far Side of the World, Blake is older. He starts off as younger, and then he gets a little bit older. But what's great about this is that in the one of the initial assaults, Blake, who's just a kid, he's just a kid. He gets his arm badly injured, and we see him in the doctor's quarters, and doctor gives him some laudanum. In Far Side of the World, the book, there's a lot about how the doctor is clearly a laudanum addict. And he eases his pain from being on the ship all the time by drinking that opium lean on the ship. But he gives him some laudanum, and he gives him his bit to bite down on, ties his arm off, and he has to amputate his arm. And what's great about this is that Lucky Jack, in his eyes, is obviously feels responsible for this, but it's a burden he has to bear as the captain, and you have to respect him for that. And the kid knows that, and the kid is proud of what he's had to go through. You remember when you read the history of World War II, World War I and World War II, the officer classes of all the European countries had this thing where if you had a dueling scar on your face, it was a mark of honor. And that's because injuries taken in battle or in war, no matter the circumstances, are an honor. They are a visible marker of your willingness to put yourself into a dangerous situation. And I think that that's something for people like me who sit around and read all day. I think it's invigorating. It makes me feel alive. It makes me feel kinship. Through words that I read on the page or through a movie with these kinds of men. And this kid is more of a man on this ship. Well, he's not more of a man than the other guys because they're all men too. But he grows up fast and he realizes what he's doing, and they have to amputate his arm. And what's great about it is that you notice that now he is a visible reminder of his idol, Nelson, because Lord Nelson, of course, had one arm, had all sorts of injuries, and then Captain Jack goes in, and he's got a book in his hand. He talks to him. The kid doesn't complain, and he hands him this is a great fucking scene, man. This is so good. He hands him a book. He says it's a history of the naval battles of Lord Nelson. And he says, "Did you know Lord Nelson?" He says, "I had the honor and privilege of serving with Lord Nelson at the Battle of the Nile," which is in the book. And Jack, at this moment, is both a boy, and he has a sense of what it was like when he was Blake's age on a ship. His initials are carved into the ship. They make him a legend while he's alive. They say like that he's shed so much blood that, the ship is part of his body, right? And he was with Lord Nelson at this battle, and he feels how great it is to be doing the job that he does. And but he doesn't show it, right? It's all in the eyes. He hands him the book. He points to the book. He says, "Look right here." Blake looks up, and he looks into his eyes, and at this moment, you see it. You see it in Russell Crowe's eyes. I mean, he's so good in this movie that you notice the thing about him in this movie is that every time they show Lucky Jack, every time they show Russell Crowe, he has a glowing disposition. He is always pleasant. He might be hard. He might be rule bound. He might be duty bound. He might be the absolute master and commander of the ship, but everybody that comes across him feels better for coming across him, whether it's because he's rebuked them or because he's given them a compliment. He is a great shining example of a leader in a movie, and that is really fantastic to me. So Blake is now the mini Nelson. He's the miniature Lord Nelson. Now, going back to one of the scenes in his cabin, this is a great scene. So Jack's in the cabin and he's drinking there. It's time for the officers to have their dinner, and they're all talking, and they ask him a question about Lord Nelson, and he mentions that he had served with him, at the Battle of the Nile, and then he tells this great story. This really, this really makes us like him. He says, I remember the very first time that he ever spoke to me. We were at a dinner just like this, and I was about your age, and he said to me, Aubrey, could I trouble you for the salt? I like that scene because it also shows that he doesn't have a life experience story to tell about Nelson where he suffered. He doesn't have some sort of weepy sob story. He doesn't have any of that stuff. It's just the fact that he talked to him, right? And then we get this really great part where he says, the second story he tells is like that he was they were sailing around the southern they were in the Cape Horn or whatever, and it was freezing on deck, and one of the midshipmen offered him his cloak, and he said, no thank you, my zeal for king and country keeps me warm. And Stephen he notices a side glance from the surgeon, right, Paul Bettany, who kind of looks at him like, yeah, right, lame, right, and this is a really dynamic scene because we get all these different characters in the captain's quarters, and they're being served on the silver, and they're all drinking, and but he's the captain. Jack is at the head of the table, and we have their servants behind him and all that stuff, and we're tempted to laugh off the stories of great men and to sort of black pill ourselves all the time with yeah, but actually sorts of things. Right. But, and obviously Stephen, Paul Bettany probably has some valid criticisms of Lord Nelson. And just like you could criticize Jack for going around Cape Horn, exceeding his orders when he didn't need to, they could have turned back. That's what happens in the Bounty. They can't get around Cape of Good Hope, and they try and try and try. And then finally he has to turn back. And he even demotes one of his officers in Mutiny on the Bounty. He demotes one of his officers, for telling him in the middle of the storm that they have to turn back in front of the other men. So he sort of breaks the chain of command, breaks the rules of decorum, and is a personal affront to the honor and the leadership of the captain. But it's too late at that point, because at that point, the people don't trust Captain Bligh. And the Admiralty will even admonish him for this. During the court-martial, they'll say, yes, you followed your orders, you did your duty, you got around, but there was a mutiny, and the fact that it even got to the point that there could have been a mutiny at all is the problem. So he says, yes, he says to the doctor, yeah, I know, in light of a story about another man, it could be laughed off, as whimsical or stupid or whatever. We tend to not trust stories that lift up our leaders like that. But he says, when you talk to Lord Nelson, you felt it was absolutely sincere and genuine, because when you were around him, you felt your heart glow. And that is probably as high a praise as you can get for a leader in any situation. And imagine yourself in your daily life. It makes me question. It makes me wonder about people that I come across in my life. Because I think that no matter what we do for a living, and no matter our position, in the ladder of life or where we are, I think that that's an admirable virtue, and one that certainly I try to do in my real life, which is that. There is a fine line. There's a fine line between being walked all over, right, or being the butt of jokes, or not being taken seriously, which nobody likes, and laughing off situations, diffusing problems, diffusing arguments, and making people come away feeling better about themselves, right? Not being a nice guy, because Hallam, his problem is that he's actually the nice guy. He's afraid to stand up for himself. He won't show any sort of backbone because he wants to be popular and be nice with people. But what really makes a person popular, and what makes you respected, as Jack points out to him later on, is the fact that that men crave leadership. It's just like with kids. It's like kids in school. You know, remember when you were in school? If you were in school and you had a teacher who never made you do anything and never held you to account, you probably think that they're pretty cool for most of the time, but you come away feeling like that they're either lazy or they didn't do anything, right? Or that they don't even know anything. Whereas children, and especially teenagers, crave structure. You know, when we were kids, it's great to think that we could be free and not have any rules, but it wouldn't be great if you came home at any time of day or night and your parents weren't there or they never cared. That's not great. It's great when they hold you to account and they tell you a time and they hold you to account, because then you can trust that if something happens to you, they'll be there for you, right? And that's the sort of thing that we pass on. We crave structure, we crave freedom, and we crave, we need this as humans. Like when we have a talent, that there's somebody above us to foster our talent and somebody to encourage us. But there also has to be somebody to tell us when we're doing things wrong or to hold us to account. That has to be the way, because otherwise we have a kind of nothingness. We don't have, there's no, absolute freedom is just, you're shitty and you're free to be shitty. Instead of being the best, the thing, God gives you a talent. God gives every single person a talent, and you have to foster the talent, but the talent has to be fostered through hard work and discipline and a love of what you do within the rules of learning the rules of whatever it is. If you're great at let's say you're great at carpentry, right? Well, if you're great at like woodworking in the woodworking shop, but nobody ever gives you any rules, then you get your finger cut off with the bandsaw. Now, at least if you get your finger, I had a teacher named Mr. Cooper, which is interesting because he was a woodworking teacher. And I told you guys this before, we'd always say, hey, give me 4.5. Give me 4.5, because he has missing his pinky. But he lost his finger to the bandsaw because it was a practice of his trade, and he was fucking great at what he did. He made furniture. He was a woodworking teacher, but outside of school, he made furniture, and he made really great furniture, and he sold it. And he only got that through practice and through determination. He cut off his finger and he kept going. Not the same day. He probably went and got some Vicodin first. Just like the surgeon in the book, but he kept going. And we have to have people that do that for us, right? Until we're grown, and then we have to do it for ourselves. That's the whole point. That's like the whole point of school, is fostering this continuous, repetitive ability to be able to get along with other people in other situations while maintaining discipline, standing up for yourself, and learning how to do it yourself when you get older. And nobody's perfect, and we're all infallible, and we all fuck up things, right? No matter what it is, but we try to have a realization and a recognition of what we've done and what we need to do. And luckily, on a naval ship, they've got a guy that, yes, is the guy that disciplines them and makes them work all the time, and they always have jobs to do, and they got to scrub the deck, and they got to clean the toilets, and they got to do all this stuff. But it's for a purpose, and they all have a specific job to do, and they got to be the best at what it is. Right? If you're the guy that loads the cannon shot, you've got to be the best at it. And we see that in the movie. We continuously see that in the movie. We even see it in the end. Do you remember at the end when they find the Acheron and they board the ship, and a guy even is there and he douses the cannon, right? So they can't fire it. I mean, even that guy knew exactly what to do in that situation, and he was right there to do it, which is fantastic. So, feeling your heart glow when you're around great people. Have you ever known anyone like that in your life? I mean, think about that. Have you known people like that? You might have just come across them one time. You might have had a teacher like that, or it was your dad or your granddad or somebody like that. I'm blessed to have had a lot of people in my life like that. But, I think we all want to be the person that does that makes other people glad to be alive, right? It's a gift. It's a gift. We're alive. It's a gift. We're alive. Life is fiery with its beauty. And we have to make people, not compliment them, but when they come across you in life, that they feel good about being alive. They feel better they remember something, So anyway, so he has that conversation in the captain's quarters, and eventually they get to Brazil. They make some more repairs. They do a bunch of stuff. They keep sailing. They sail around Cape Horn, all that stuff, and then they come across the Acheron, and this is great. There's this great scene where one of the midshipmen, a young fella, has to play the decoy. So the carpenters on the ship managed to throw together like the most complicated fake ship you've ever seen. It's like with barrels, it's floating, it's got a mast, it's got a sail. It looks very complicated for me, but for them, I guess it's easy. And then they float it out there. They douse all the candles on the ship, and they say, and Captain Jack says, "You're going to take command of the ship, this other ship, the decoy ship." He goes out there. He lights his candle, and it misdirects the fire from the Acheron, so it allows the Surprise to tack the other way, and so now they can surprise them. And when the kid jumps back into the water and they pull him up by the rope, they hoist him up, and he says, "Now wasn't that fun?" And you're like, "Yes, it was fucking fun, man. It was awesome. That was like Frogman Navy SEAL shit, right? In 1805." And they gave this kid the responsibility to do it, and it's cool. And it seems like something Jack did when he was younger, right? Everything is through experience that he's doing here. Experience, ideas, innovation, listening to his lieutenants. And the other thing about Jack is that the listening to his lieutenants. I mean, he's got his counterpart in the surgeon, right, who's the exact opposite of him. But here's the other thing is that the surgeon is also a naturalist, and he wants to go to Galapagos, and he wants to go and draw beetles and stuff like that. And Jack promises him as soon as we have time, and as soon as we, now that we've made some good time, we can stop by one of the islands and we can do that. And then they spot the Acheron, and then they know that they got to keep going. And this is where Jack really, puts his foot down and says, "Remember your duty, sir." Right? There's a lot in the movie about, am I speaking to you as the captain, or am I speaking to you as my friend? Right? Well, no matter what, he's still the captain. And his friendship, it's not that his friendship will get in the way. It's that he chooses the times, and when duty calls upon the times, to put his foot down firmly so that he's not going to be swayed from their mission. And this is one thing that I find hard to understand, not only in real life, but in movies. Oftentimes, it's our right as people, especially as Americans, to complain. We love complaining, and no matter what job you're in, you probably feel a right to complain. Like teachers, complain. Cashiers complain. Servers complain, right? Line cooks complain. But that's fine. That's to be expected. But there is a point where when the person in charge tells you to do something, right, as long as it's in line with the mission or whatever it is, that you do it. And the problem that happens in Mutiny on the Bounty is that the midshipmen and the common seamen come to a place where they think that they have power and that their ideas are better than the captain. And they may be in that situation, but making the decision is important. And you have to remember that the person in charge is the one to be held accountable. Now, I'm talking about normal decisions. I'm not talking about immoral decisions or immoral things that you're asked to do, obviously. I'm talking about the common work that we do every day, right? Yeah, the movie is A Master and Commander, The Far Side of the World. Peter Weir, 2003, Russell Crowe. So eventually what happens is First of all, we see that Steve, the common surgeon, the physician on board, he's not your common surgeon, is respected by the men because he has to do a trepanation on the old timer, the old Holdfast old time. He's this guy. I'll show you. He's this guy right here, this Holdfast fella. Right, he's the one who's got his knuckles tattooed. He tells he tells Blake, hold fast. He's the one who I think gets trepaned. And you know what trepanation is? I learned this from my friend Gavin in Belfast many years ago. He said, "You know what trepanation is? Trepanation is a thing that they did in I think they got it from ancient African culture, which was when a person had they thought they had spirits, right? Or they were hearing voices, or they whatever. It was from an injury, and they had a brain swelling. They would drill a hole in their skull to let the pressure release from their brain, and he has to do that to the old timer who gets busted in the head during one of the battles, and he puts this like cork device into his skull. He holds up a coin. He says, "Let me see this." The other guys. He asked the other surgeon, the other doctor on board, by the way, is the dentist, and he's always fucking shit up. And he's like, "Look, I'm not your common spoon master. I'm just a spoon man. I can't do this trepanation here. Give me the common spoons. Clickety clack, clickety clack. I can do the common spoons." This guy fucks it up. And they're like, "Is that his brains?" And he's like, "No, that's his brains." And then the bosun comes along and says, "All right, you loafers." The bosun, by the way, is clearly the bosun is the coolest guy to be on the ship, right? I've always liked that ever since Treasure Island. Like, the bosun is the dude who has, first of all, Jim Morrison says he hears something like a bosun's pipe, right? And then you've got this hard man walking down the he's like throwing people on the gangplank, right? He's a hard fella. He's telling everybody what to do when it's time to get up in the morning. There's a scene where it's time to get up in the morning, and he's going by and he's cutting the lines from their hammocks, and they fall and they're going, "All right, you loafers." Right? And they're like, but they can't fuck with him because he's a bosun. He's a hard man. Anyway, and this guy's got like a top hat on. He's pretty cool looking. I think that guy plays a gangster in a bunch of, he's a wide boy. He's a London gangster in a bunch of movies. Anyway, so he makes like 500 people get to work or whatever just by walking up to him, which is pretty cool. And then he looks down and he says, "Is that his brains?" Right? Which is pretty cool. Yeah, exactly, Mick. Spoon man, feel the rhythm with your hands. I guess, which is about a heroin addicted schizophrenic guy in Seattle or something. I don't know. So anyway, so what happens? So there's a scene where this is a nod to Samuel Taylor Coleridge in The Rime of the Ancient Mariner. They see a bird, which I don't think is clearly supposed to invoke an albatross. They see an albatross, and the Marine on board is trying to shoot the bird. Stupid fucking idiot. First of all, don't you know? Haven't you read the Coleridge poem? Don't you know not to shoot the albatross? The albatross is cool, dude. Albatross rides the ocean of the sky, and its normal territory is like an entire hemisphere of the earth. It's huge. They fly thousands of miles a day. They've got a huge wingspan. They're awesome. And anyway, it comes down by the ship, and of course he doesn't shoot the albatross. He shoots the doctor. But what's great about this scene, I think this goes unnoticed in the movie, is that, and this is real movie magic. Okay, now movie magic is something that's like almost a fucking. Sorry, I'm cussing so much. Movie magic is like laughable now, right? I'm not talking about Al Crowley magic in the making of movies and the magic rituals in the decadent Hollywood, but I'm talking about how movie magic has become the illusion of special effects, right, in a movie. And I think that Dune did a good job with that. Really showed me something that is I wonder how is that done. It looks so not real, but not just real, but truthful to me. Well, this movie does the same sort of thing. Yeah, I got a mouth like a sailor tonight. Speaking of which, I always heard that the term F-U-C-K comes from seamanship, because when this, I don't think this is true, but when the sailors got their card to go into port, when they could, when they got leave off the ship, they had a card, and if they had gone to see if they'd gone to a house of ill repute, when they came back, they were docked for unlawful carnal knowledge. But I'm not sure that's true. I think I just got that from somebody talking about Van Halen or something like that. But anyway, there's a lot more cussing, by the way, in the books, which I found interesting. I didn't, the movie doesn't really do a whole lot of that, which works for the movie, by the way. It's almost superfluous and unnecessary in the movie to have any cussing. They don't need it. But anyway, so the doctor gets shot, and now we have to have the dentist, the fat, drunken dentist, work on him. And Dr. Paul Bettany does not look good. He looks terrible, right? And so at this point, Captain Jack turns the ship around, and at this point, he does turn the ship around. So he's been told by his friend, "Why didn't you turn back?" But at this point, it's obligatory for him. He cannot lose this guy out of friendship. So they go to an island, they go onto the shore, they build a little hut for him, and they operate on him, and he's well again. And then it ends up that he's healed enough where the doctor can take out Blake, the kid, and the big fella, and they go looking for all the species on the island, and they capture a bunch of stuff. But this is another reason why the movie's great, because when the doctor comes to the hill and looks down the hill and he sees the Acheron on the other side of the island, the Acheron doesn't know that the surprise is on the other side of the island, right? And the look that he gives is, he looks up like that. He gives like a kind of sigh, and even he, at this point, knows that he's duty bound. He's gotten his thing. Even if he hadn't gotten his thing, they race back, and Blake says, "Come on, we got to hurry." And I love this little touch, because when I was watching it, I was going, "Oh no, man!" I felt bad. I felt bad for all the iguanas and all the dragons and stuff, and the birds in their little cages. They're going to leave them right on this desert in Galapagos, Darwin land or whatever. And he says, "Open the cages," and we see all the animals go free. I really like that. I thought that was great to include in the movie, because it answered something that I think the audience was looking for at that time. And then they get back on the ship, and now they got to go after it. Now something I didn't mention here is that Hallam went up to Blake. I got sidetracked from this. Hallam, at one point, I'm out of sequence here, but Hallam had gone up to Blake on the ship, and he says, "You were always kind to me." He grabs the cannonball and he jumps overboard, and he unalives himself. And this is really a powerful scene, because what happens here is he meant to do it. He's looking up out of the abyss, and he's floating into the darkness, and it's over. Now their curse is gone. And remember that earlier the crew had blamed him for the loss of the kid that got swept overboard with the mizzen mast falling overboard when they were going around Cape Horn, and they blamed the Jonah, right? Well, they all gather on the ship. The cook hands him a Bible, and it's open to the book of Jonah, and he closes it. And Captain Jack's words here are heartfelt and genuine, and he says that, sometimes he gives this great speech. He says, "Sometimes we realize when we're older that we're not the men that we always wanted to be when we were younger." And for anybody who said ill of, or who did ill to Hallam, please, Lord, forgive us, and let him forgive us. And immediately after this is great. Immediately after this, the wind picks up, right? And it rains. And so what that shows me in the movie is that regardless of whether they think they were cursed or not, and whether this kid was it, the kid, not a kid, he's a 30-year-old man. Hallam, with him gone, the crew now is both relieved and depressed. They're in this kind of netherworld where they don't want to feel relieved, but they also don't want to feel depressed because, I mean, the kid, like the guy, was, I mean, he was pretty hopeless. You know, Jack took him back into his quarters and said, like, the men, you know, they need respect. You know, they need to respect you. They crave leadership. You can't try to make friends with the common seamen because in the end they'll just turn on you. And the guy says, like, yes, respect, honor. Like he's trying to remember like a fucking school lesson or something, right? And it's like, oh, this guy's hopeless. He's already failed his exams a number of times. He's never going to rise above midshipman. He's too old for it. And then in the end, this happens. But when this happens, and then they pray, God blows a wind. They sail off, and then it rains, and they are baptized again. It's a sort of naval baptism where they are washed away of any of the bad things that they may have done in that situation. That's the symbolism in the movie. But then right after this is where we see the albatross and we see the shooting of the doctor. And so what that shows you is that even though they've been, you know, even though there's a scene of forgiveness, of supernatural forgiveness in the scene where they're moving again, it shows that the men are infallible and that they are, I mean, that the men are fallible. Have I been saying infallible the whole time? I'm sorry if I've been stammering. Look, if you're watching this and I said infallible when I meant fallible, I'm sorry. I'm a slow boy. I feel like I said that probably a bunch of times. Oh, man. I'm just saying a lot of words. So the men are fallible. The men make mistakes. Oh, my. Did I say that like a million times, that the men are infallible? I'm an idiot. Fuck. Okay. The men make fucking mistakes. Excuse my language. And what's great about this scene is that even the Marine who shoots the doctor by accident, we look in his eyes, we look in his face, and we immediately see regret. And we don't dislike him, which is crazy, right? It's crazy because everyone on the ship is likable except for Hallam, and he's gone. So everybody in the ship, everybody on the ship is likable. We like every single, even the big dude, right, with the who hits the guy with the cannon thing, the guy with the hammer, the cook who's always complaining, everybody is likable, right? And we see that he seriously knows he's made a mistake, and we also don't know who's going to live. You know, this is God's providence. We don't know in the final battle who's going to make it and who's not. And even though Blake lost an arm, he is going to make it. The other guy that started, the kid that started off the movie, you know, beat to quarters, he's not going to make it. The big fat man who sings the song, "Let the waters roll, Jack," that guy, he's not going to make it. The Marine guy who shot the doctor, he's going to make it. We just don't know. So eventually, though, we come across the Acheron, and they surprise them. They have this great plan using subterfuge. And now one of the things I was watching here was that I was thinking while I was watching it was, I was questioning, okay, in the rules of war, right, if you get caught covering your uniform, or you're in battle, or you're in the other uniform, right, it's a hanging offense. It's dishonorable. But this is great because Captain Jack tells them, first of all, they have to disguise themselves as a whaler. So they put a bunch of, wet wood or whatever in the fire. It looks like the ship's on fire. They hoist up a whaling flag, and they all cover their uniforms and what they look like, and they look like, whalers. And Captain Jack tells them, no matter what you do, this is contrary to what he did to Nagel. Remember, Nagel, the guy shoulder checked him and then and didn't salute, and you have to do that. But at this point, all that goes away, and he says, there'll be no yes sir, there'll be no saluting, and they say yes sir. They're like, all right, Captain, right? And then they have a look, but it's not obvious. It's like they realize that shows us that they are so firmly into the life of discipline on this ship that breaking the rules is something that doesn't come easy to them. And so they pull up beside the ship, and then this is how they settle it. At the last minute, they take off their cloaks and they're in uniform. So when they actually board the ship and fight, they're in uniform. So they're not breaking the rules. And then they board the French ship. Lucky Jack is fucking awesome, dude. I mean, it's not quite swashbuckling, but it's certainly great. It's a great combat scene. It's a great sort of almost Braveheart Gladiator-esque combat scene where there's a lot of action. And one thing about this movie that's great is that none of the action is superfluous, because we're not on an open battlefield where there's a bunch of stuff. We're on a ship where everything has its place and is compartmentalized, and everybody has to do their duty in a certain space. Every action that the people take is in line with their actions as a seaman on the ship. So everybody's given a job, and Jack gives this great speech to him before they get on the ship, where he says to him that, that essentially we're a million miles from home, but this is England, and we're all that stands in the way of these guys. And the great thing about this scene is that Jack has the entire crew gathered, right? They're below deck. He's got the whole crew gathered. And if you look in that scene and you look in their eyes, I believe every single person in the scene is in the scene. I believe them. They're not reading lines. They're not in a film. They are in that scene. I believe that it's something that happened. It's obviously historical fiction, but I believe the truth of what they're doing there. I believe that they are listening to their captain, and they want to fight for their captain, and they want to fight for each other, and they want to do this thing. And it's great. So then they wait for the ship to come up. They board the ship, and this is another great thing. So Jack makes his way all the way to the back, and of course, then this guy tries to come out from under a sail, and they got the most French-looking fucking crew they could have gotten here, right? It's really crazy. Like the dude with the teeth, and he's got like the bandana or whatever on his head. And he's like, un de trois, le misérables, le petit bon, right? And he grabs the sword at the last minute. He doesn't get murked right there. He goes in the back, and this is cool because when he goes in the back and you see the surgeon operating on the men, you go, that's the captain. That's the French captain. That guy looks like the captain. And so he claims that the captain is dead, and he told me to give you his sword, right? Well, you know that the captain on the French ship was like, find the handsomest motherfucker on this ship. Somebody who's dead. This guy right here. That guy looks like he would be captain. So the guy that's dead that they think is the captain is that guy looks like a captain too. So that was clever. But you know that the surgeon, when you're watching the movie, is the actual captain, and he's pretending that he's the surgeon. So then he hands over the ship to, they struck the colors, and Jack hands over command of that ship because it hadn't sunk, and he says, you're gonna go back to Valparaiso or wherever, and he gives his lieutenant his first position as captain. And this is great. This is something that you don't get when you watch the movie and the first time, or when you're not paying attention, that what he's doing here is he's passing along the sequence of leadership. So just like Jack, we see, and not even through exposition, we see it, they show it to us, that He was on the ship when he was a kid. He's carved his name in it. There's a scene where he's going up the lines, up into the topsails. He's like constantly, he looks like the captain, but he's racing the doctor up and down. It's like they're kids again on the ship. So he's like born on this ship. And then we get Blake, who is a kind of Nelson, who Nelson served over Jack. And Jack was once a kind of Blake. And now Jack gives command to his lieutenant, who then he himself will become a kind of Jack. And Jack hopes to become a kind of Nelson. So it's this continuity of leadership that is gained through through experience, through discipline, and through duty. So, yeah, shouts out to everybody watching right now. Shouts out to everybody who came over here from the Crucible. Shouts out to Jason right there. Hey, Toledo, how you doing? Shouts out to Nico, Natasha, everybody who's watching right now. Thanks for being here with me here on this Saturday night talking about this great movie. It's so great. So anyway, they take command of the ship, and then he learns from his own doctor that, oh no, the captain's not dead. No, the doctor died months ago. They don't have a doctor. So that guy was just pretending. So now we get, Jack says, turn it around. We're not going back to land. We got to go follow the ship. And the doctor knows that. And now they go back to quarters or whatever. They arm themselves again and get ready for the whole thing over again. And then they ride off into the sunset. And that's a great movie. It's a great movie because, first of all, please don't make a sequel. Right? God, please don't make a sequel. Please don't try to reboot this. Please don't try to do anything to it. Leave it as it stands. I mean, it's one thing that's great is that although the movie came out in 2003, and I talked about the Big Nine thing, and they changed the books and all that stuff, and that, you know, Lord of the Rings, I'm not knocking Lord of the Rings, Return of the King. I'm not really knocking that. But don't kill me for this. But in my opinion, first of all, The Two Towers is the best of those movies. Although I do like the scenes with the dragon and Smaug. I've seen fire. I do like that. And I do like the first one. But I like The Two Towers the best. I think that's the best of the Lord of the Rings movies. I don't like the newer ones, the Hobbit movies. Don't kill me for that. You know, I can see why people like them. But, you know, to compare this movie to Return of the King, which has a lot of similarities, big battle sequences, lots of characters that we care about, lots of supporting characters. It's epic in scope and sweep. It's a saga. All of these things. There's a difference between the two. And the difference is that, first of all, this one is, historical fiction, and that's, high fantasy. So I'm not talking about that difference. I'm talking about the difference in what the substance of the movie. And the thing that bothers me about Return of the King is that in the film, at the end sequence, when the dead people come alive or whatever, and you have the ghost taking over, the spectacle on the screen is spectacle. We're watching a grand spectacle, and we're aware that we're watching it. And we sort of, Lord of the Rings does a great job of maintaining our care for the characters throughout the movies. But this movie's different because it's microcosmic, because it stands for the entirety of the Napoleonic Wars, but with two ships. But the thing is that we're on the ocean of life. You know, and I think that that's what's important about this movie is that we're all sort of trying to navigate through life, if you will. And because Kristen says, hey, I don't like it because it makes me cry. No, the movie that makes me cry is the movie War Horse. Oh my gosh, don't watch that movie. Please. Holy shit, dude. And also, I gotta say, well, I won't mention the other movie. Well, the other movie is A Star. The other movie is A Star is Born with Bradley Cooper and Lady Gaga. I know, I'm a sensitive fella. But when I watched that movie, I went to see it in the theater, and I I'm very audible when I watch a movie. And when I saw Star is Born, from the first second of the movie when they were playing the music and I saw the Boots walking out on the stage, I automatically knew. I didn't know anything about the movie, but I knew this guy's going to be a drug addict. He's going to be depressed, and he's going to unalive himself, and it's going to be painful to watch. And that's why it got me. Warhorse is, oh my gosh! From the first second of the movie when I saw that horse, I went, no, oh no, please, please. And then the horse gets stuck in the barbed wire on the field of battle. Oh my gosh, please. So yeah, just I cannot watch that movie. I watched it. I cannot watch that. This movie, Master and Commander, makes me well up with internally with a sort of dudes rock, fucking dudes rock, dude. Yes, this movie is so good, man. I'm sorry, but this movie is so good, dude. Holdfast, bro. This movie is sick. Dudes being dudes. We're in battle. We're going to fight a worthy fucking adversary, man. Right? And we're going to lose some, but we're going to win. I mean, like, this movie is sick. It's so good. Lord of the Rings Return of the King does not do that to me. I'm too concerned with the overwhelming spectacle on the screen. And also, I know that they're going to win. Right? This movie, I don't know. I'm not sure of what's going to happen when I first watch it. And even if you're sure that Lucky Jack is Lucky Jack and he's going to take the dub at the end of the movie, like you're so concerned with all of the other people that you don't know who you're going to lose, and every time you lose somebody on the ship, it kills you, man. Right? It sucks. I did know that the fat man, what the waters roll, Jack, that guy, I knew as soon as that dude turned around and said, I think we have the day, I was like, oh, this guy's not going to make it. And then bam, damn it. Even the Marine guy who shot the doctor, man, you want that guy to win because that guy's the Marine guy and you know that he's leading the guys on the ship and you want him to win, man. You want him to win. Yeah, they're going to win. That's what makes you have joy through tears. Yeah, I suppose. But first of all, I wasn't a Lord of the Rings. Look, again, don't kill me, but it's funny because I have friends, and even when it came out, I mean, I was living in England, and and my friends would go see the premiere of the movie because remember they came out the same time. They came out at Christmas every year for 3 years in a row, and my friends would always say, "Come on, we're going to go see Lord of the Rings," and I'd go, "What? I'm not going to see that." And they'd go, "What do you mean you're not going to see it?" Like, it seems like the sort of movie that I would like in every way. I love knights and, I like high fantasy and I like, I like battles and I like wizards and sorcerers and all that shit. But I don't know why. I just didn't. Of course, I've seen all the movies like 100 times now. But I like the Two Towers the most. I think I like the Two Towers because it's the darkest of the movies. But anyway, so Master and Commander, though, the end of the movie, they win. They take a few L's, and that's par for the course, and then they keep going. And I got to say that the books, Master and Commander, is good, but it's a good book, and I can see why people love this book. But I liked The Far Side of the World better, which is much later in the saga. I mean, there's a bunch of books in between, but I liked The Far Side of the World better, and I think it's because there was less. I was already into the story. I didn't have to take any time learning the ropes. Did you know that's why it's, have you ever heard that it's, I'm a drama school former actor, so I can tell you this. It's unlucky to whistle in a theater. Did you know that? They always talk about yelling fire in a crowded theater or whatever, but it's unlucky to whistle in a theater. And the reason is because of Mariners, because of seamanship, because oftentimes in the theater, sailors in their off time for income would man the ropes for the stage curtain and for the backstage moving the furniture around on stage. They would man the curtain, and if you whistled, sailors whistled to each other to drop the lines, and so apparently one day somebody in the theater was whistling, and one of the guys heard it, and so he dropped the sandbag, which would raise the curtain, and the sandbag killed somebody, and so it's unlucky to whistle in a theater, but it comes from that. There's a lot we get from seamanship, but there are a couple of great passages here. Like in this first one, the seamen laid it on, but with all their efforts, they could scarcely exaggerate the event. For the southeasterly gale increased from its first warning blasts at the end of the last dog watch to a great roaring current of air by the end of the middle watch. A torrent so laden with warm rain that the men at the wheel had to hold their heads down and cup their mouths sideways to breathe. The seas mounted higher and higher. They were not the height of the great Atlantic rollers, but they were steeper and in a way more wicked. Their heads tore off, streaming in front of them so as to race through the Sophie's tops, and they were tall enough to becalm her as she lay there a try, riding it out under storm's staysail. This was something she could do superbly well. She might not be very fast. She might not look very dangerous or high-bred, but with all her top gallant masts struck down on her deck, her guns double breeched and her hatches battened down, leaving only a little screened way to the after ladder, and with 100 miles of sea room under her lee, she lay to as snug and unconcerned as an eider duck. She was remarkably dry vessel, too, observed Jack, as she climbed the creaming slope of a wave, slipped its roaring top neatly under her bows, and traveled smoothly down into the hollow. He stood with an arm around a backstay, wearing a tarpaulin jacket and a pair of calico drawers. His streaming yellow hair, which he wore loose and long as a tribute to Lord Nelson, stood straight out behind him at the top of each wave and sank in the troughs between. A natural anemometer. And he watched the regular dreamlike procession of the diffused light of the racing moon. I like that last sentence. The dreamlike procession of the diffused light of the racing moon. Also, we get, even in that little passage, we get a complete description of Nelson. We get a comparison between Nelson and Lucky Jack. We get a description of the characterization of Jack. We also get a nod to the seafarer, Anglo-Saxon seafarer poem, right? Breaking O's on the crest of a wave. The Far Side of the World is much better. I don't want to say better, but it's a good movie. We get descriptions of Harlem from the very beginning. And then, let's see. Oh, yeah. On page 22, he even uses the word badinage. Norm, right? Badinage. It's a badminton term. Page 87, there's a reference to Nootka Sound, which I found interesting. Have you seen the show Taboo with Tom Hardy? I actually liked it. It didn't get very good reviews, but I liked it, and it's set in the same time period. The Dutch East India Company is at war, basically funding the war in Canada and the war with America. We've covered this in Last of the Mohicans and such, but they're trying to take a small piece of land called Nootka Sound, which is a real thing in Western Canada. And Tom Hardy's character is a former naval slaver working for I think it's Dutch East India Company. And they think he's dead. He has sort of come back to life in London and reappeared because he was brought back to health by a shaman, and he eventually makes his way through geopolitics based in London and wants to keep Nootka Sound, become basically a billionaire, and fight against the tyranny of the company. And it's all over this little spit of land, and it's called Taboo. Taboo, of course, is I think a Polynesian word. But it's a pretty good show. And then the most interesting thing here was, in this book, was that in this one section, this character, Moet, he says, on page 126, he says, he quotes, he's like the poet on board the ship, and he's constantly making rhymes. And then he says, are those your lines? He says, she plies her course yet, nor her wing speed the falcon could for pace exceed. Are those your lines, Mr. Mowat? No, alas, they are Homer's. Lord, what a fellow he was. Ever since I began reading in him, I've quite lost any notion of writing myself. He being such a... Mowat's voice trailed away in admiration, and Stephen said, I had no idea you were a Grecian. No more I am, sir. I read him in a translation, a book a young lady gave me for a keepsake in Gibraltar by a cove named Chapman. A very splendid cove. I began because I esteemed the giver and because I hoped to be able to knock poor Rowan on the head with some pretty good images and rhymes when he rejoined, but I went on because I could not stop. You know him not? No, not I. Though I did look into Mr. Pope's version once and Madame Dacier's. I hope your Mr. Chapman is better. He's talking about Chapman's Homer. Keats wrote a poem called On Chapman's Homer, and Chapman was translated Homer. And then, of course, he's talking about Pope there, Alexander Pope, the sort of prototypical Enlightenment neoclassical poet of the time. Oh, it's magnificent, a great booming, sometimes like a heavy sea, the Iliad being in 14ers. And I'm sure it's very like the Greek. I must show it to you. But then I dare say, have you read the original? I had no choice. When I was a boy, it was Homer and Virgil entirely, and many a stripe and many a tear between. But I came to love him for all that, and I quite agree with you. He's the very prince of poets. The Odyssey's a fine tale, sure, though I never could cordially like Ulysses. He lied excessively, it seems to me, and if a man lies beyond a certain point, a sad falseness enters into him, and he's no longer amiable. Stephen spoke with some feeling. His work and intelligence had called for a great deal of duplicity, perhaps too much, no longer amiable. So what he's talking about here is that, first of all, Ulysses or Odysseus, do you remember when we read Dante's Inferno and Dante places Odysseus in hell for his lying and his stratagems? He's a war hero, but he is lying to subterfuge the enemy, and his whole deal is in stratagem and subterfuge, so of course he places him in hell at this point. But what I really found interesting was when he says that it's full of 14ers, because, okay, this is kind of cool. Because I wrote here on Homer, Iliad, Chapman's Homer, and dactylic hexameters, 14ers. So the Iliad is written in dactylic hexameters, right? Which is 12 poetic feet, and a dactyl, which I've talked about before. I know I'm getting into the weeds here, but a dactyl is a unit of a metrical foot that's stressed, unstressed. So it's like Alistair or Julius or Dangerfield. Those are all dactyls. And then Chapman translated it into heptameters, so it's 14 lines, so he calls it 14ers. And the reason that's interesting to me is because it's a great example of showing versus telling in the book. It's showing us that the reason this guy likes this verse is because the rolling lines of the heptameters mirrors the rolling of the sea. The sea is already poetic in a sense because the rhythm of the poem, especially like iambic pentameter, iams are unstressed, stressed. It's down up. It's like a wave or a heartbeat. So it stands to reason that sailors like sea shanties and singing and poems is because it mirrors the rhythm of life and of the ocean, the water of life, right? And also that the Odyssey is a seaborne poem, and the Iliad is a land poem. It's about the Trojan War, Ilium, right? Troy. Then we get into Stephen's private vice, which is laudanum. This is really good. He says, and then Stephen starts talking about the language of the book is great because it talks about, for instance, the doldrums. As for the doldrums, I believe you may perhaps misuse the term. As I understand it, in nautical language, the doldrums are a condition, a state, not a region. They are analogous to tantrums. A child and God help us a grown man, alas, can be in the tantrums anywhere at all. Similarly, a ship may be in the tantrums anywhere. Similarly, a ship may be in the doldrums wherever she is long becalmed. I may be mistaken, but Captain Aubrey will certainly know. And Aubrey agrees with the chaplain and with the doctor because he tries to diffuse the situation. But then we get Constant talking about Stephen and his laudanum habit. Stephen therefore knew nothing of St. Elmo's fire. He says, St. Elmo's fire in a Moby Dick sense, almost it lights up the cannons on the ship. Far below, swinging in an ever-widening but always peaceful arc as the swell increased, his ears blocked with balls of wax, which they show in the movie, and his mind, hitherto much harassed by thoughts of Diana and the oppressive, unbreathable air, now soothed by a judicious dose of laudanum. He knew nothing of the torrential rain that half drowned the ship in the graveyard watch, nor of the subsequent near tornado that flung her so violently about amidst bellowing thunder no higher than the mastheads and an almost continuous blaze of blue and orange lightning. The laudanum had returned to it last because after mature and wholly objective consideration, he had been brought to see that as a physician, he was required to sleep well enough to perform his duty the next day. Furthermore, the poppy had not been created idly, and a rejection of the natural balms provided was contumelious, what is this? Contumelious pride, as heretical as the notion that because a thing was pleasant, it was also sinful. And in any case, this was St. Abden's day. After his long absence, it worked beautifully, but even half a pint of laudanum, and he was nowhere near his old excesses, could not have kept out the enormous crash as lightning struck the Surprise, melting the shank of her best bower anchor, running along the 7 foremost larboard guns and setting them off, but above all, rending and shattering her iron-hooped bowsprit in the most extraordinary manner. Contumelious. Hold on, let me look up this word. Hold on 1 second. Let me look this up. Contumelious. Archaic, scornful, insulting, insolent. Contumelious. Oh, I don't know that word. Okay, now I know it. Hey, we learned a word. Okay. The most interesting thing, though, and this is my last bit here, is that this is crazy. This is major synchro. Okay, this is big time synchro. So there's a part on page 253 where it says, it didn't rhyme. I told it over to myself and it didn't rhyme. If Rowan were here, he would knock your poet on the head. His poetry always rhymes. I remember a piece of his as though it were only yesterday. Awful the grinding noise of keel and heel with an unusual motion made the crew to reel. I believe there are almost as many kinds of poetry as there are rigs. So there are. The peepal tree grows on the edge of the forest. On the fisherman's strand, nets lie in hopeless confusion. It is true that I'm sitting on your knee, but you are not therefore to suppose that you may take any other liberty at all. Did it rhyme in Malay? It did, the first and the third. And then he says, what is this? And then he says, where's the part about the pig? He says, oh, here it is. The invisible and creeping wind, repeated Maitland. They say pigs can see the wind. I thought that was amazing. Page 252. They say pigs can see the wind. So I looked this up, and in Byron mentions in Don Juan how the pigs can see the wind, and then Emerson, who I've done analyses on all these people. Emerson, in a letter when he was 19, wrote, pigs can see the wind to said, and it seemeth to them red. And then he says in his letter, he quotes Butler's Hudibras, and he says, had lights were better, where better eyes were blind, as pigs are said to see the wind, filled Bedlam with predestination, and Knightsbridge with illumination. And this is crazy because when I read that, as I read that part, filled Bedlam with predestination and Knightsbridge with illumination, I was listening to a song called Knightsbridge by an artist called Fort Romeo that I'd put into and this wasn't just popped up on the algorithm. This is a song that I had in a playlist that I was already listening to, and I'd added it to the playlist like 11 years ago. And it's a song called Knightsbridge. And I read the word Knightsbridge as the song was playing. So that's major synchro. That's what books do. Books sharpen the sword of the mind with the whetstone of words. So I just thought that was crazy. But pigs can see the wind. Sounds like something out of Macbeth or The Tempest. Pigs can see the wind, 'tis said, and it seemeth to them red. That's pretty cool. I only say that because right now I'm working on trying to self-publish one of my books, my book of poems, Runes. And when I do that, when I publish it, I'm going to self-publish it. I've been stressing about this for years, but I don't know how to get a book published. And I don't, other than submitting, magazines. First of all, no one buys the magazines, and second of all, the magazines don't take unsolicited work. And so, also, I mean, what do we have with academia, with official establishment academia? I dislike everything that they do, especially right now. So I figure I'll self-publish. Rambo self-published Illuminations and A Season in Hell, so why not? So I'm going to do that, and then when I do that, I'll put it up, and then maybe if you want, you'll buy a copy. But it's about megalomania in the Third Reich, Imperial Rome, and in the Troubles era in Northern Ireland. It's called Runes, is my book. So anyway, so that's about it, you guys. Hey, thank you, everybody, for being here tonight. Really appreciate you. Thank you to the Crucible. Appreciate you guys. Thank you, everybody who came over from here. Hit that like button. Hit that sub. And big shouts out to Andy, BPF. Shouts out to Rachel out there. Thank you, guys. Thank you all so much. My vacation ends Monday. My vacation ends Monday. Just send up Norco Percocets. No, what is it? 9 pizzas? What a stupid rhyme. What a stupid saying. But I only say that because my vacation ends Monday and because of the solar eclipse. Hey, are you guys going to watch the live stream tomorrow with Jamie talking about the solar eclipse? That will be fun. I think everybody should be there for that. Shouts out to Jamie out there. And let's see. Okay, yeah, Dudes Rock. Shouts out to Digital Minefield, Maddie out there. Let's see if we got any support, you guys. Shouts out to Jason, our friend Jason out there, who drops $10. Thank you, Jason, for being so based. You are based. Thank you, Jason. Really appreciate you. Thank you so much. Hey, shouts out. Drops that on PayPal. Shouts out to Jeb Francis, who's I hope I didn't dox your name. JF. Thanks to our friend JF. Who says Master and Commander stream dropped $5. Hey, thank you so much, buddy. Appreciate you. Thank you so much. You can still support me on all of the various things if you want. I'm sure Jason has dropped the links in there so much. Shouts out to Real John Connor right there. Shouts out to Real John Connor. And I'll look at super chats in a minute. I'm looking at all the various things. Hold on, it takes me a minute here. I know, this is riveting. When BPF called me earlier, I was trying to set up the stream, and I was like, I'm a slow boy. I was trying to do a million things at once, and so I'm sure that was riveting content for you guys to listen to. Yo, shouts out to Real John Connor, who drops $10. Thank you so much, homeboy. I love you. Appreciate you. And don't forget, you can reach me at madmaximalism with 2 X's at gmail.com. And okay, here we go. I'll be back sometime this week. Again, my vacation ends, so I'm going back to work. I'm kind of looking forward to it. I mean, I've been on vacation here for 3 weeks, which is good. That's great. But it's a long time. Let's see. Let me look at... and this was a sponsored stream, by the way. Shouts out to Justin out there for sponsoring the stream. Thank you so much, Justin. If you want to sponsor a stream, if you want me to cover a book or a movie, you can support me at PayPal and drop me $100. Give me a list of stuff to cover. I got a bunch of stuff coming up, which I've said in the last one, so I'm not going to give you a list again. But shouts out again to JW for that $20. They weren't nihilistic. They believed in God. Lucky Jack would have never gone stabberoonie. That's right. Yes. No, what's great about the movie is, another thing that's great about the movie is they recite the entire Lord's Prayer. They don't cut it short. They don't They don't. It's you rarely see this in movies, right? Because the discipline and hierarchy on the ship depends on a fervent and genuine belief in God, and they must submit to God's providence and to His will out there on the sea of life. They must do this, and they don't cut it short in the movie. They pray. Even the naturalist scientist Stephen talks about his belief in God when discussing the various iterations of animals and beetles on the ship. And the beetle is an interesting symbol because it shows that, first of all, the beetle is carapaced with a shell. So just like the ship. So it shows that the people are all, in a sense, like beetles flying into the wind and the waves of air, just like the ship is alone on the sea. And so the small thing has to make a difference and be big, and everything matters in their universe, in the universe. So I think that's interesting, an interesting choice in the book and in the movie. Shouts out to JW for that $50. We don't have time for your damn hobby, sir. Sir. Hey, shouts out for all the gifted memberships out there. First Person Q gifted 5 memberships. Jason gifted 5 memberships. Rachel gifted 5 memberships. Shouts out to Rachel. Base Homeschool Mama. Love you so much out there, you and Andy. Shouts out to Rough Hands for that $5. No comment. Thank you so much. Really appreciate you all. Thank you all for the support. I think that's about it. If you want to support me, you can do that anytime with the links provided in the video description, the channel description. You can go back and watch my latest streams. My latest one on Bret Easton Ellis, which didn't do that well, but I was proud of. I think I honestly did a probably more in depth and deeper deconstruction, breakdown, exegesis. Explication of Bret Easton Ellis than I think you're likely to find anywhere. And I've covered 5 or 6 of his books now. So the latest one was on Less Than Zero and the Shards. Go back and watch that. That was my latest one. You can also watch any of the navigational Mariner streams that I've done. The Tempest, A Heart of Darkness. I've done a bunch of them. We've done like 200 videos here, 200 streams. So I think that's about it. You can contact me through my email anytime. Give me suggestions. Please leave a comment afterwards. And that's about it. I'm going to leave you guys with Sting and cut off his new album. And of course, we start off with Rooks G, Atlantic Drift, which is appropriate. And then here is Rooks G with his Operation Neptune EP, ROXG. Please go and check him out. Here's Rooks G with Slingshot Effect from Operation Neptune. Thank you so much, everybody. Appreciate you. Hope you have a wonderful, what is this, Saturday? Saturday night. Love you guys. Thank you so much for being here. And I will see you again very soon. Maybe I'll see you on Monday in the chat at Jamie's stream looking at the eclipse, okay? And here we go. Here's Rooks G. Cheers, everybody. Peace. Love you all. Chim chim. Let the waters roll, Jack. Was it worth it? Yeah, it's worth it. If you're strong enough. Keep on LIVIN out there, everybody. I love y'all. Peace.